My name is Lee Brown. I'm the lead pastor here at Sloan's Lake Church, and it is my pleasure and my honor to introduce to you our guest speaker. Is that weird? That's really, really weird. Our guest speaker, Pastor Alan Waibel. Alan is now the lead pastor at Darlington First Church of God in Darlington, South Carolina, and we just want to thank him so much for being here and welcome him as he brings God's word today.
So in that middle picture, do you notice how much hair I had? That was dark and full, and this spot right there that you can all see that I can't wasn't there. So, wow. It kind of feels like I'm preaching at my own funeral. Nice things to be said and just crying, and it's like, oh sure, Kelly, I have to try to preach after that. Thanks. And I apologize to the back guys for trying to keep up with me with the camera. I know that won't be as easy today as it is with Lee, because Lee is very disciplined with where he stands, and I am not. Thank you so much for being here. I know that not all of you are here because it's my last Sunday, because I don't know all of you. So I'm assuming that you're not here for my last Sunday, but thank you for being here anyway. I appreciate that so much. So this is my last sermon. I'm calling it Straight is the Path. Straight is the path. And I guess it's my farewell address. It's my, last Sunday to be with you all. Y'all. I'm trying to learn how to say that, and it's just not coming yet. I'm sure after a few more weeks that y'all will just come out, but right now it's just it's forced, but it'll get there. But it really is a privilege and an honor to be with you and just kind of share with you what's going on in our lives. This last couple of weeks has been just a complete whirlwind. We went with Pastor Lee and Renee, Christina and I did, with their kids to the national convention in Wichita last week? It was like 2 weeks ago, but Sundays make it weird. And then, and we had a great time there, and then flew from there to South Carolina, Darlington. If you're wondering where Darlington is, I didn't even think about putting a picture of the map. That would have been so clever had I done that. But if you think of North and South Carolina, and you can kind of picture where Myrtle Beach might be, and then there's the capital of South Carolina, Columbia, kind of picture where that might be. And then Charleston is Charlotte, North Carolina is in, obviously, North Carolina. And you kind of make a triangle with those three locations. Darlington's kind of right in the middle of that. So that's where it is. And it's been a long time since I've seen that much green in one place. It is so beautiful there. Kind of reminds me of that right there, just all the green. So through this whirlwind, I'm trying to figure out what exactly am I going to say in my last sermon here. And I've really struggled with it, because any other time I've come up with a sermon, it's like other ideas will come and it's like, well, no problem, I can just do that the next time. Well, there's no the next time. Or at least it will be quite a while before there's a next time. Maybe I'll have the opportunity to be a guest speaker some other time in the future. So it's been one of those things where I've just been really wrestling and really struggling, and I'm going in this direction in my mind, and then God kind of closes that door, and I start moving in this direction. So in your bulletin where it says sermon notes, you'll notice that it's blank. That's because I was blank when, Frida's like, you got anything? I'm like, just run with it blank, because I got nothing. And so I'm sitting at my computer yesterday, and so we get back, I guess I should say this. So we get back Wednesday night, and we know that we're going to have the realtor come out on Saturday. And our house was not ready for the realtor to come and look at. And so we've just been working nonstop since the moment we touch down until our realtor came, trying to get the house just presentable enough for her to come through and say, you've got a lot of work to do. And so last night, I'm like, I probably should finally get this on down when I'm going to preach. And so I'm working on it, and Isabel walks by, and she's like, why are you still working on this? You knew it was due. And all these things that I had been telling her for months and years as she's working on her homework, she's now telling me, it's like, good point. But it just wasn't coming till last night and our last couple days. And I determined, why don't I just share with you our journey? The path that we've been on for the last couple of years. Just to kind of give you a glimpse of what that journey has been like. And so from there, I've decided to leap off from that passage in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. It says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. I don't know about you, but when I learned that, I learned it from a different version. It said, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. But I thought we'd just kind of take that apart a little bit. Trust in the Lord. Trust in the Lord. I have to tell you that through the last 2 years, I don't know if there's ever been a time in my life that I have gone through more bumps and more closed doors and more frustrations and more stress than I faced in the last 2 years. It's been a never-ending roller coaster. But through it all, I knew that if I were going to make it through, I had to trust in the Lord. I had to trust in the Lord with everything I have. That verse says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. That means with everything that you have, that you just have to depend on him so much. And then it goes on to, and lean not on your own understanding. When I read that, I just, that whole thing of leaning into something, of kind of your fail-safe. It's like as you're going through life and you're trying to trust in the Lord, but you don't see everything that the Lord sees, and so you just kind of start leaning back into your own understanding. You kind of depend on that. And this verse is saying, don't do that. Another way of saying it, if you read it in the NLT, is it says, don't depend on your own understanding. Because your own understanding is going to let you down. Now, I want to make it clear that the book of Proverbs here is not telling us not to have understanding. The book of Proverbs is not telling us here to check your brain at the door and just trust the Lord and you don't have to think anything. It's not saying that. Because over and over through the book of Proverbs, it tells us to develop our understanding. It says, incline your heart to understanding. In other words, to make it part of your heart to try to understand things, to be in understanding with whether it's people or whether it's your situation around. The Lord is instructing us to try to get as much understanding as you can. Incline your heart to that. It says, raise your voice for understanding. I think this would be great in schools. If you have a question, raise your voice for understanding. Teacher, clarify that for me. I need to know what you're saying. Also in Proverbs, it says, understanding will guard you. Understanding will guard you. And then I think this one's great because it comes from the very same chapter that we were talking, where we brought the first verse. And it says this, blessed is the one who gets understanding. So in the first part of the chapter, it says, don't lean on your understanding, but you will be blessed as you get understanding. As you put your understanding, keep trust in the Lord, but you develop your understanding. You try to figure out exactly what's going on. You allow the circumstances to speak to you. You allow other people to speak into your life. You're getting that understanding. There's just a couple more that I want to share with you. Wisdom rests in the heart of the man who has understanding. And finally, The heart of him who has understanding seeks knowledge. Over and over and over through the book of Proverbs, it doesn't denigrate understanding. The Christian religion is not one that just says you walk by faith and you don't have to think about anything. God wants us, all of us. He wants our intellect as much as he wants our heart. He wants us to have real understanding of him. He doesn't want us just to go through the motions. He doesn't want just blind obedience, but he wants obedience that comes from understanding, through understanding. But what happens is that we begin to depend on that understanding. And we don't really get the whole picture, do we? Paul puts it this way in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, when the whole love chapter, he says this. He says, "For now we see dimly, but then face to face." In another translation, it says, "Now we see dimly as in a mirror, but then we will see face to face." And that whole mirror concept, when I was a kid, I remember that my grandparents had this really, really old mirror. I don't know if you ever had the experience of looking into a really old mirror, not like just an old mirror. Like my kids will say, I'm old. So not like, you would need to be much older than me. You would need, it'd be older than my dad, and my dad getting up there. But it needs to be older than that. These were mirrors that came with my grandparents and maybe their parents. And when you looked in that mirror, you could almost not see your reflection. I mean, it was there, but it was so distorted, it was so warped that you could almost not recognize yourself. Has anybody else had this experience? Am I talking? Anyone? Okay, good. All right. It's like, this congregation's being unusually quiet. And so I just wanted to make sure you're still with me. And I think that's what Paul's talking about when he's looking in the mirror and we see dimly. You're looking in this mirror and it's such a bad reflection that you don't see the whole picture. That's how we see life as we're walking through life. What we see is just a dim reflection of what was really there. I was going to bring up a piece of puzzle. And so I sent the kids down to go get a puzzle for me to have, and we'd already packed all the puzzles. So imagine I'm holding up a piece of puzzle. I think, man, this thing is really hot. I think sometimes when we look at life, we look at this piece of puzzle, this one piece that we have, and we look at it, and we study it, and we examine it, and we try to figure out exactly what it is, and we try to figure out where it's going to fit, and we try to figure out what's even part of, because sometimes you just have one eye in the puzzle, and that's all you have, or you have just a little bit of this or a little bit of that, and from that we make these huge inferences of what life is like, of what that puzzle is going to be like. And then when the puzzle actually gets put together, that piece was nothing that we thought it was going to be. Because we just look at that one piece, but God sees the entire puzzle. And once the puzzle is put together, it's a beautiful picture. But we don't get to see that beautiful picture. We don't get that opportunity. We don't have God's perspective. All we have is the perspective of that one little piece of the puzzle. And this verse is saying, trust in the Lord with all your heart. And don't lean on what you can understand about that one little piece of the puzzle, because you don't have the whole picture. Only God does. And it's going to be a beautiful picture when it's done. And we just have to trust in that. Trust in the Lord. No matter how stressed it might be, no matter how difficult it might be. I completely skipped the big idea. So if you wouldn't mind going back to that, because it really is important. And it's like the very first slide, and I just right on past it. But the big idea is that no matter what you're facing, you can trust God. No matter what you're facing, you can trust God with it. Because he sees the whole picture. Don't lean on your own understanding. So, over the last couple of years, we knew that God was beginning to stir in us. It was a time to move, time to regain the place as a, that's not the way I want to say it. How I want to say this is that God was leading us to a place where we felt like it was time to be the lead pastor. That it was time for us to not be the associate any longer, but to be the one that casts a vision for a church and to lead the church in that vision. And so we started looking. God, where do you want us? And I will be honest with you. South Carolina was not anywhere on the radar. Our radar was pretty small at first. It's like, God, what do you have in Colorado? And I heard crickets. And I'm like, God, seriously, I want to be in Colorado. This is where I am. This is where I love. This is where I want to be. What's going to, chirp, 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 chirp. And so as Christina and I were wrestling with this, it's like, do we start to look outside? Do we start to venture outside the state of Colorado? And I was starting to feel led that way. And Christina was starting to not feel led that way, for sure. And then we went on a family vacation. And for whatever reason, during that vacation, Christina said, maybe we do need to look outside Colorado. So I came back, and the first thing I did is I went to my dad. Because as I've already kind of alluded to, not a spring chicken. I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm like throwing you under the bus here, and I apologize. Well, I love you so much. But it's hard to leave. At this stage in his life, at this stage of my life. And so he sat down over dinner, and I kind of unfolded where we were at. And I said, but Dad, how do I leave you? And he looked across that table and he said, don't you dare. Don't you dare not follow where God's leading you because of me. God has a plan for you. God has a calling on your life. It is obvious that you're supposed to be someplace where you can preach every week, and you better not follow that because of me. God has a plan. You better follow it. All right, I guess I better follow it. And so we started looking around and trying to trust in the Lord and not lean on our own understanding too much. And we kind of believed that God, if God was going to use us, he was probably going to use us in the western part of the United States. Don't you love it when you tell God the plan? It's like, okay, if it's not going to be Colorado, at least make it west of the Mississippi. Well, actually, west of Kansas. And so we started looking in California and some other things, and just nothing would come through. Nothing, just dead end after dead end after dead end. And so last summer, about this time, we were just looking online, so there's a website that the Church of God has, a little insider information here. And if you're a pastor looking for a church within the Church of God, churches that are without a pastor that would like to, have a pastor, will put their profile up on this website, and pastors can go and look. It's kind of like eHarmony for churches and pastors. And so we were looking through that, and there's a way that you can indicate that you would like to you're interested in that position. And we looked at every single church that was available. I mean, any church that had posted on there, we at least opened up their profile and looked at it. Well, at one point during that process, there's like several buttons you can click to like links to go to different areas within that profile. Well, there's a very subtle little link that will indicate that you want more, that you're interested in that location. So I was at the DMV last January. I had to get my license renewed. And I walked out and I had a phone call from Winter Haven, Florida. And I knew right away that I was going to answer it and it was going to be, "Hi, this is Sarah from Card Services. There's nothing wrong with your credit card." But I was certain that was who was going to. And when I answered the phone, "Hi, this is Dale. I'm the pulpit committee at Winter Haven Church, and we got your resume, and you made it through the first cut." Apparently, I winked at them, and I didn't realize it. I hit that little button that said I would like to be interested, and I didn't even know that I had done that. And so all of a sudden, I've made it through the first round, and I didn't even know I was a contestant. And so I'll never forget one of the questions he asked me was, "So what made you interested in Winter Haven?" I don't know. So Christine and I called her, and I was like, "You're never going to believe the phone call I just had." And I told her who it was, and she said, "Florida? I don't even want a vacation in Florida. What makes you think I want to live there?" So I got home, and she's like, "Okay, tell me a little bit more." And it went through this process, and it was amazing because it felt like God was moving. So that verse says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him." In all your ways acknowledge him. That's how I learned it. But as I think about that, when you're driving down the highway and someone lets you in, you acknowledge them. "Thank you." I feel like God wants a little bit more than "thank you" in the rearview mirror. I don't think that's the acknowledgement that he's looking for. I think it says that the way that this new translation that I read this morning hits the nail so much better is, "In all your ways submit to him." So we tried to submit to Florida, and we were going through this process, and we went all the way through, and everything looked great. I mean, the board, they loved us. The board was 100% behind us, but when we got there, we're not going to Florida. We've been talking about South Carolina. In case you've been missing something, we are not going to Florida. It looked like God's plan. And it says, "In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight." That's how I learned that. And he will make your path straight. As this path that we're on, this verse even, it reminded me of that verse in Jeremiah 29:11, where it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Now, I do want to give a little caveat here. Jeremiah was not speaking, or the Lord here was not speaking to an individual. He was speaking to a nation. And he was saying that I have a plan for this nation. But we are children of God, are we not? And do you really believe that God doesn't have plans for his children? No. So even though this verse was specifically written to a nation, I believe that it's not totally inappropriate to look at that and say, if God has a plan for a nation, wouldn't he have plans for his children? And I believe that the plans that God has for us are plans to prosper us, not financially, but prosper us to make us better. And that they are to give us a hope and a future. And when that plan just vanished from Florida, I was like, "Hello? What's going on here? I thought you said that you're going to make the paths straight. And it brought another verse to my mind. It's out of Psalm 119, 105. It says, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light on my path. It's a light on my path. It's not a light that brightens up the whole path. It's a light that shines at the feet so that you can see the next step. And when you get there, then you can make the next step. But God doesn't show us the whole path. Probably because the whole path would just scare us. If we saw everything that we were going to have to face, if we saw everything that God had, that he knew was going to come across us, we would probably just sit down and say, I'm good. I will just sit right here on the path. But he says, no, I have a light for you just to see one step. And then the next. Can you trust in me that far? Can you put your understanding in me that far for just one more step? So where we're going through all of that, and it's like, whew. But God, this path still doesn't seem very straight. And I began to realize, can you put up the next slide so I make sure I know exactly where I'm going? Good, that was exactly where I was going. I realized that through that process, God was refining me. That through that process, he was making me better and different and growing me in ways that I never anticipated. So, how many of you ever been to Fort Morgan, Colorado? Isn't the smell there wonderful? Yes. You drive through Fort Morgan and you just want to stop and breathe. And that is not fresh air. And so Christina has some family there. And matter of fact, we have some of the family that were right down from around there. And we were driving back from Fort Morgan one time, and Christina pulls over and she goes, oh, you got to see this. And she brought up one of those things. That is one of the ugliest things I have ever seen in my life. It's a sugar beet. And she said, this is what they make sugar out. You got to try some. And so she had me eat a little bit of that sugar beet. It's not good. It's not good at all. But you take that sugar beet and you put it through the refining process. You add heat, you add pressure, and you get one of my favorite things in the world. I mean, it's obvious I like sugar. Sugar is awesome, but not the sugar beet. It's what's been refined, it's what's been processed, it's been what's been put through the fire. And God has been putting us through the fire, our whole family, as we've been going through this process, trying to refine us to be that beautiful sugar. Something that will be sweet to those around us. But what about that straight path? That's what my path is looking like, right there. Twists and turns and all sorts of things. And it's like, am I not trusting in the Lord? Am I leaning too much on my own understanding? Am I not submitting enough to him? Is that why my path isn't straight? Well, I'm way over time, so I can't go through all the Hebrew on this. And partly because I ran out of time as I was writing it, so I didn't even look it up. But I did look up another translation. And it says, in all your ways submit to him, and he will direct your paths. I don't think God intends for it to be a straight, easy shot. Maybe your life has been a straight, easy shot. Has anybody's life been a straight, easy shot? Yeah, I didn't think so. Maybe your life's been a little bit like mine. There's boulders sometimes in the way. There's twists in the path that you never saw coming. There's times when the path seems to keep looping around over and over. But God's directing all of that. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Don't lean. Don't just depend on your own understanding. But in all your ways, if you submit to him, he will direct your path. No matter what you're facing today, I'm standing here as a testament that you can trust God. You know, even right now, it feels like there's twists and turns and things aren't as straight as I'd like them to be. But I do know this, that God has directed us to Darlington, South Carolina. I don't know why Darlington, South Carolina. I don't speak the language yet. I'm not 100% good with humidity. About 90%? No, I like about 2% humidity. I will only get that if I actually step into a refrigerator. But that's where God's called. That's where the path has led thus far. And all I can do is trust in the Lord. And he'll continue to direct my path. And I know that if you trust in the Lord, he'll direct your path as well. He probably won't direct you to South Carolina, but if you come to visit, you have a place to stay. We'd love to have you. Would you pray with me? Lord, thank you for being a God who directs paths. Lord, I thank you for being a God who, no matter what happens, no matter what obstacles we face, no matter what twists and turns, you've seen it all. And you're still weaving that all together to make a beautiful picture of what our life will end up looking like. A picture we may never see until we hit the other side of heaven. But Lord, you've called us to trust in you. And you will direct our paths. Lord, teach us to trust in you today. In your name we pray. Amen.
In 1876, Alexander Graham Bell made history's first complete phone call to his secretary. Just 11 years later, in the fall of 1887, a pioneer by the name of James Pollock came across an issue of the Gospel Trumpet, the primary communication tool at the time for a fledgling movement called the Church of God. Pollock was convinced that the message that was proclaimed in this magazine of Jesus being the center and the subject of all we do, of living in holiness and unity, was the message that was needed in Denver, Colorado. And so he sacrificially sent $100, or what would now be $2,500 when adjusted for inflation, to the editors of the Gospel Trumpet, asking them to send a messenger or a company of people to come to our city. D.S. Warner, the founder of the Church of God movement, responded to this call, bringing a group of early pioneers and meeting for 6 to 10 weeks at a little United Brethren church off 27th Street. Sensing a continued need for the message and the gospel of Jesus Christ, James Pollock continued to pay $75 a month, or what would roughly be $2,000 a month today, to continue to hold meetings and share with the people God misses most what it looks like to live a Jesus-centered life. The challenge of our 130th anniversary is the same as that which was issued by our predecessors at our 100th anniversary, that we would not look to the past, but continue to look to the road ahead. As we enter into our 130th year of making Jesus known in Denver, Colorado, our challenge remains the same as it always has been. We are still pioneers who give sacrificially, doing whatever it takes in the era we find ourselves in to reach people where they are and help them live Jesus-centered lives. Over the course of 10 weeks this fall, we'll gather together for an expedition through our past and into the road ahead. Each weekend, we'll encounter a relevant message designed to be engaging to where you are and challenging where we are going together. We'll also meet in life-changing small groups where we will allow God's story to invade and reshape
our story. Ours is a world that is changing more rapidly than ever. But a few things remain the same. We are still a pioneering people who are called to give sacrificially and invest back into our community, making a disproportionate impact in Denver, Colorado. And just as we did at the beginning, we are called to help people live Jesus-centered lives. Won't you join us this fall, starting on September 10th, as we journey together for an expedition through our past and into the road ahead?